February the 19th, 2024. I'm your boy, Dana. What's up, dog? You can call in 709-589 Canadian number 4406 709-589 4406 What's up, pussycat? What do I got down here? Supposed to have a little intro song. Clicked when I should have clicked. Alright, so we're going to go back to March 11th. Hi, everybody. We've got a poll, by the way. Let's talk about the poll for a second. What's not to like about a poll? Did the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the International Atomic Energy Agency, the universities worldwide, the medias worldwide downplay the Fukushima radioactive fallout to hide an extinction level event? And this is just a fraction of the actors that participated in this horrific betrayal. The answer is clear, and if you don't understand what we're talking about, we've done 6 years of research expeditions, 4 to 5 months a year without coming ashore. Well, you pull in different ports, little outports, with 100 or 200 people in it, and get fuel and water and basic necessities and repairs if you can afford it. You get all of that. So the big interesting thing about this is that here's the medias pretending, this is just a fraction of them, pretending they're in the fuel pool of the building to the left, which doesn't exist. Actually, physically doesn't even exist. And the only way they can get away with it is the full participation of the NRC, the International Atomic Energy Agency, which, let's face it, that's who cooked up this whole thing, and your universities and key positions in your government had to all participate in the same law for that particular law to work. So you had Reactor 1 detonated, Reactor 2 detonated, Reactor 3 seriously detonated, and because it's a plutonium mixed oxide, it cooks off at about 200,000 degrees hotter than a typical nightmare nuclear meltdown. And over 600 helicopter pilots died at Chernobyl. Chernobyl was a single reactor, brand new with no fuel pools, and was using graphite. These are pure uranium plutonium reactors, very modern reactors. And that's Reactor 3 and Reactor 4 over there. So it's 4 reactors and 8 fuel pools. So they stripped it down, Reactor 3 and 4, this is what they were left with. So there is nothing functional left, right? It's very important to understand the rest of the show tonight. So we got explosions of Reactor 1 on video, explosions of Reactor 3 on the same camera, but we don't got explosions of Reactor 4. And Reactor 4, they said, didn't blow up. So why are they doing stuff like that? Why are they so dishonest and deceitful? Why are they so hateful, I think is the better word. These are culprits, right? These are villains that do stuff like this. Why did these malfeasance pretend they're in a building that doesn't exist? When they say there was no adverse side effects, remember there's 865,000 cancers in the first year. Every one of their assertions tonight, and by the way, the official story now is this never even happened. The International Atomic Energy Agency since last year, is going around doing interviews, and remember, they picked up 60 or 30 million one-ton bags, but the official story is that never happened. So we are dealing with some incredibly evil entities. Explosion at the nearby number 3 reactor. Now, so this is March 11th, this story here. And this is via Freedom of Information Acts. They released 4.4 million emails, which is over the top, right? A lot of it's redacted. We never covered that last night, that kind of stuff, or tonight. Okay, so 4.4 million emails is just absurd, right? And links are below to all of them, by the way. In the very bottom of the description, you'll find those links for 2011, 2012, 2014, 2015. Links all go back to the nuclear regulatory site. So again, last night I showed you the heat signatures from the 4 reactors of the apocalypse. And I also played this tsunami clip last night. I'm going to play it again tonight for context. So when they, on March 11, a lot of the stories tonight are March 11. So when they say March 11, they were doing this and they were doing that. I want you to think about this tsunami and incredible damage for 1,200 miles of the coastline. And then ask yourself, how did they actually do what their assertions are going to be? But I'm going to provide you with a bizarre, absurd amount of documentation to back up my assertions.
The Japanese Prime Minister appeared on TV to put into play a plan they'd rehearsed for years.
We will secure the safety of the people of Japan, and in order to minimize the damage, the government will make every effort possible. And we ask the people of Japan to continue to be cautious and vigilant and keep tuned in to the reports on the television and radio. And we ask the people of Japan to act calmly.
Don't take any pictures of nuclear reactors. That's what they mean by it. So there's an incredible amount of damage going on that day. That's so important, for this story that we're going to do. Explosion at the nearby number 3 reactor that occurred Monday morning may have caused a glitch in the cooling system of the number 2 reactor. Well, number 2 is right here. That's the explosion they're talking about. There's a glitch here, right? The glitch is, so I think this is March the 14th, not March 11th, this first story. So on the other side of his reactor 1, it blew up too. I showed you those 2 explosions, right? So you're not going into reactor 2. Reactor 4, by the way, is blowing up. You're not going there. You're not going there, okay? You're not checking water levels. You're not pumping something into the cooling system. That's not happening, okay? Nobody's there. There's nobody going there, and if you do, they don't ever walk again. They die right on the spot. So on the other side of reactor 2 is reactor 1. So reactor 2 is right there. Reactor 3 is on this side. Reactor 1 is on the other side. It blew up. Reactor 3 blew up. Reactor 4 blew up. And reactor 2 melted down and liquefied. The company has also begun to work to depressurize the containment vessels of the number 2 reactor. Well, you can't decompress number 2 when you got number 3, the plutonium mixed oxide site, cooked off, right? These are lethal doses from very far distances. We're talking about tens of miles away. This plume is killing people. The government's Nuclear Industrial Safety Agency said such a step is necessary to prevent the vessels from sustaining damage and losing its critical containment function. Well, the reality of it is you can't do nothing at reactor 2. This was the only fire truck they got. Look, and there's so it's kind of deceiving. It might look like they're right here, but they're on the other side of the pump house towards the ocean. They're not actually, they can't see Medusa, which is what we lovingly refer to as the mixed oxide fuel, the plutonium mixed oxide. So all of these pictures, the majority of the pictures I'm showing you tonight, if you look up this story here, you can download it. It's around 1,900 pictures. And because this is like a 10-year-old video, right? So it doesn't really play very well on current. Some parts do. So you got all these folders. That's folder 78. And you can zoom in on all of that yourself, right? You can go download all of that. I can't remember. I think it's 1,900. 1,900. pictures. Let me go back to the beginning, though. Yeah, so if you look this up, the photos of the accident at Fukushima, it's at TEPCO Electric Power Company's site. And you'll also find links to it in my playlist. I've done 6 videos just on these pictures. There's almost 2,000 pictures or something. With only one fire pump working, one fire pump truck, I think is what they meant to say. Well, only I gotta get in there. And this was one picture of it. This is on the seaside. And they're spraying water towards the other, little to your left kind of a scenario, right? But only one fire pump truck working. TEPCO is placing priority on injecting water into the number 2 reactor through the number 1 and number 3. Both number 1 and number 3 reactors still need coolant water injections according to the agency. Well, you can't do anything at Unit 2. Medusa detonated and it lost around 10 reactor cores. You know, I showed you the video. I'll show it again later coming up, but the fuel pools in the reactors were up above the building, not at the bottom of the building. And so that picture is really important. You'll see that a lot tonight. Different versions of it from the original footage released by Shitsu, TEPCO. The blast earlier in the day injured 11 people. The reactor's containment vessels was not damaged, with the government dismissing the possibility of a large amount of radioactive material being dispersed as radiation levels didn't jump after the explosion. Damn it. So there was no extra radiation after that detonated. So if you, like, the poll tonight, where are you to? The poll tonight, did the NRC, the International Atomic Energy Agency, medias and universities downplay the Fukushima radioactive fallout? And then why did he do it? Really was to hide the extinction level event. That's why they're doing it. So, saying there's no extra radiation from a mixed oxide fuel with 10 reactor cores that detonated too, it's like 1,000 Chernobyls, because each reactor core is equal to 100 Chernobyls. And Chernobyl was brutal. They actually closed 9,400 farms in Ireland, Scotland, and the United Kingdom because of radioactive fallout from Chernobyl. But Chernobyl is nothing on the scale of Fukushima. Each reactor core at Fukushima, because of pure uranium, pure plutonium, was equal to 100 Chernobyls. As radiation levels did not jump after the explosion. And so this is the NRC's internal memos, because they knew this was being collected in the future, see, and published. And so they started the cover story right away, didn't they? How can you look at Reactor 3, for instance, and say there was no spike in radiation? It's pretty despicable. And this is the very, very norm for people in nuclear industry. As soon as the little friggin' inbreeds at the universities graduate, they go try to one up the monsters by saying even more outrageous lies. The whole industry, everybody in this industry is corrupt. It's unbelievable corrupt on top of that. It's corrupt on a scale that, and nobody can hold them accountable. The police can't actually charge them. Only the regulatory agency can make suggestions, but you can't actually punish the people. So there's no incentive not to be evil. It's not illegal to poison you, by the way, with radiation. If it was, they couldn't murder you in the hospitals and with their radiation therapy that kills 97% of the population that uses it. And misdiagnosis for cancer is 3%, which is the survival rate of radiation treatment. Quite interesting. Quite the coincidence, isn't it? And so anybody that would suggest, and this picture was known amongst them right away, anybody that put out these memos and said there was no adverse side effects from this, these are the worst of the worst humanity has. These are the people you should be locking up. Take all the potheads, make them go out and shovel for 10 hours. Take these people that wrote these stories and put them in jail for life instead of the other way around. TIPCO, which shouldn't exist, was nationalized right away, right? And then they were kept around, in figurative speaking, because the industry bought up all the shares. They were sold for like 2 cents on the dollar. The industry bought up the shares because they knew in the future they would jack the price up and then they could profit off, and there was a big incentive. A lot of greedy people. So this employs many facets of the nuclear industry. It's hard for people to appreciate the nuclear industry. There's 9,000 facets to the nuclear industry. And the most vicious out there, of course, that are going to attack you the most are the military, the Navy, the stock exchange, the mining companies. And I've been harassed, bullied, intimidated, been threatened. I've been arrested. I've been shot at. And now we got Operation Long Jump is coming after me and my reputation, as if I had a reputation anymore. That's long gone. And anybody got anything negative to say about me are going to get magnified, megaphoned out, right, in order to denigrate my character. And that's what they're concentrating on now. There's nothing I can do about it. I don't have a right to stop either, right? I have to do what I got to do because nobody else will do it. So TEPCO was left in figurative charge so that you could have somebody to blame instead of the International Atomic Energy Agency and the nuclear regulatory agencies, which is where the blame should be firmly placed, right? And also the engineers who built these disease factories should be locked up in jail for putting the reactor cores at the top of the buildings when they were waiting for them to cool down for a couple of decades. So if you have an accident, you lose the whole inventory. Imagine giving your baby a crib, right? You buy your baby this crib. Now, if the kid leans too hard on any of the top bars, if he grabs it too hard trying to learn to stand up, that falls and the guillotine comes out and chops him in two. That's the equivalent, but except it's not as quick, right? It's not as vivid. It's not as, I suppose, as poor. But that's what it's like, though, for every species. And that's why we talk about an extinction event tonight, because the radioactive fallout covers the entire planet in about 25 days. And it never goes away. It's pulsing energy at the speed of light every second. You got an invisible snowstorm covering the entire planet, pulsing energy every second. And that you're not frightened to death. Said 7 workers at the site and 4 members of the self-defense forces were injured. Of the 11, 2 were found to have been exposed to radiation. 2. The radiation covered the entire planet, but only 2 had some exposures. Eh? That's amazing. Gee, that's wonderful. Since the magnitude 9 quake hit northeastern Japan last Friday, forces let's keep going here. Since the earthquake hit Japan last Friday, because it happened on Friday, Japan's time, wasn't it? Some reactors at Fukushima #1 plant lost their cooling functions, leading to brief rises in radiation levels. As a result, the cores of #1, #3 reactors have partially melted. The cores have partially melted. Well, because we have the luxury of hindsight, right? So let's see if it partially melted. Here's a pretty good picture. It's hard to see because it's gone up several thousand feet. Does it partially melt on the way up or partially melt on the way down, I wonder? Or when it's exposed to air, it all melts down right away, by the way. This is a model of the Xenon 133. And if you feel left out, don't worry about it. It got to you the week after. But America and Canada got hit with confirmed numbers from a study of 450,000 atoms per cubic meter of air. The government ordered residents within a 20-kilometer radius of the plant of the initial blast at plant number 1 reactor, a total of 483 people are still attempting to leave the area, according to the nuclear agency. So why are you talking to the nuclear agency for something like that? The nuclear agency ruled out the possibility of broadening the area subject to the evacuation order for now. Like, when that happened, that's all hands on deck, right? We should have sacrificed 1 million nuclear academics. And if you try to leave, shoot them, right? So that the other ones will go and do the work. That would have been the right thing to do. Like, everybody will agree with me in the future. Well, you might not now, but you will in the future. March 11, 2011. Radiation level rises in Fukushima nuclear plant turbine building. Well, we know number 1 melted down in about 50 minutes, by the way. Emergency generators were dispatched. Did anybody bother to tell them they had a tsunami and you can't send generators through all of this stuff? Radiation levels rising in Fukushima nuclear plant turbine building. The turbine building is the key building of the conventional turbine island in a nuclear power plant. It houses the turbine, the generator, the condensers, and other equipment to convert thermal energy from pressurized steam to mechanical work used to drive the generator. And the turbine generator is a key component of the power conversion system. The steam turbine receives high pressure and temperature steam from the nuclear reactor and converts to heat energy and mechanical energy, which is converted to electricity by a generator. March 11, 2011. The radiation levels is rising in the building housing a turbine because they had a massive earthquake, so it might have ruptured in there that we don't know about. Following Friday's powerful earthquake, the operator, Scumbag Electric Power Company, said Saturday. The company also said monitoring data suggested the air pressure level is stored inside the container of the Okay, so this is pretty interesting because you just had a tsunami, right? They had the tsunami. This is when it's receding. I got a better picture for you. That's when it calmed down. But remember, another tsunami came right in on top of that one, right? These guys were up on a tank, right, taking these pictures. And so when this ran through the site, you're not working any more valves. You're not working batteries, which is absurd, and that'll come up in the conversation in a bit. You're not tinkering with the electrical. You're not hooking power back up. You know what I mean? You mean what I know? Do you get it? Yeah, even that alone, if it just looked like that, you're still not going to have anything functional on the site. But remember, it came in at 400 miles per hour. There was nothing functional left in that site, period, or any other site on the coastline. And some places, the coastline, they went up to 10 kilometers inland. This is the 11th of March. If the cores are not sufficiently cooled, there's a danger of a possible core meltdown. Well, they need 4,500 tons a minute, 1 million gallons a minute, because they were running, see? And you can't just switch them off like a light bulb. It doesn't work that way. It takes many, many days to even get it down to 5%. So, and if you don't keep cooling to it, it'll go up to a meltdown right away. So the state of emergency at a nuclear facility was declared, and it's the first time such a state of emergency has ever been declared. And Yukio Idano, he was bragging how he never slept for 72 hours. I can't remember, done like 300 interviews in 72 hours. And he said, no, there's nothing happened there. Everybody's lying. You ask me, don't listen to them people. I'm in a no. And he was lying the entire time. In hindsight, right, we can quantify that assertion. According to the NISA, the worst of the worst that humanity has to offer, officials, although the reactor core stopped operations after the earthquake hit, water had to be inserted to the core to cool it. You better cool it. So they inserted water into the reactor core. So they ran down right after the tsunami and they put water into the reactor core. Okay. I don't believe you, but okay. Although workers had to initiate emergency core cooling system procedures, Yeah, the valve's over here somewhere. And then you got to turn on the light and turn the cables, and you got to hook up the batteries. All right, yeah, it's all sitting there where it was, I'm pretty sure. Nothing moved, right? The lack of an external power source and the failure of emergency generators crippled the system. That's pretty fucking polite. It tore the system off the coastline for 1,200 miles is the reality of it. There wasn't a telephone pole left standing for about 1,200 miles. They sent in the generator trucks then and hooked it all up. TEPCO officials dispatched 51 generator vehicles to restore power. When they get there, even if you're four-wheel drive, you're not crawling over this stuff, okay? Reached one of the nuclear reactors late Friday, and some of the reactor power was restored. Dana, I dare say it was. This is the electrical room of number 4 reactor, for instance. You can be sure reactor 1, 2, and 3 are going to look very, very similar. They're all the exact same height and same spot. And right behind it is the common spent fuel pool at the same level too, by the way. Bonus, planet killer. Some of that reactor's power was restored. They don't tell us which reactor because that would be too much fun. Listen, you're not restoring power, okay? You're not doing that. This was 7 years later, I think. Officials from the local communities gathered at a special monitoring facility in Okuma, which is about 2 kilometers away. It's been abandoned ever since, to oversee the cooling of the core. Why are you going to a building? Why are you going into a city 2 miles away to oversee? You're not going to oversee jack shit. Like this is the basement of one of the reactors, for instance. You can see what ended up down there. It literally everything. There was also the possibility the seawater pumps for cooling purposes may have stopped. At 2 reactors at the number 2 plant, which is the Durnford plant, if those pumps remain inoperational, it could affect the emergency core cooling system at those reactors as well. TEPCO president mentioned the accident at the Fukushima Durnford, not just the Daiichi, in 2012. And a book by a Fukushima worker, the bottom of the Durnford reactor may be broken through, and there was rumors of a possible explosion. And Miles O'Brien said they used 100 men to pull wire a mile to reconnect the cooling system. And I don't believe him, particularly with the lies he's told, right? The one-armed bandit. Impacted TEPCO's facilities. So to give you some context of how many places got knocked out, they had this little doozy right there, and this was from March 11th. So you got all these facilities have lost power, all these thermal, so you got nuclear power stations, thermal power stations, hydropower stations, transmission systems. You had blackout at 3.8 million houses from just TEPCO. These other operators would have had huge numbers too. March the 22nd. So everything is, it's already covering the planet at this stage. Oh, sorry. Jumped the shark. Secondary containment buildings aren't all that robust, but still apparently no change in the primary containment radiation levels, however, after the explosions. There's no change in the radiation levels after the explosions. On March the 26th, this planet was doing a death knell from radioactive plume. This model is based on 9 days of radioactive fallout after the last reactor exploded. It covers the whole planet. And it's based on 1 million to 10 million atoms per cubic meter of air. 1 million to 10 million atoms of Cesium-137 per cubic meter of air. Back to March the 12th, 2011. CNN, they had breaking video that they could not explain to me. It looked like a containment building disappearing in an explosive cloud. Well, let's have a look, George. Oh, yeah, that building disappeared. That's pretty... you nailed that one. March the 12th, 2011. This is the day after the tsunami. Upon further review, it sounds like they probably had a hydrogen leak. Every time I heard a leak, I think a nuclear scientist should fall down and break their nose or something. From the turbine generator's cooling system, which allows hydrogen to build up in the secondary containment building and set off by a spark. Well, oxygen will set off the hydrogen too, right? But the hydrogen is created by the meltdown. The meltdown, the zirconium cladding is exposed. It's pyrophoric in one way, where it catches fire when it's exposed to air. It cooks off at around 1800 degrees, and then uranium plutonium pellets inside of it will burn at around 9,000 Fahrenheit degree temperatures. And so the presence of the hydrogen is because of the nuclear meltdown. It's confirmations of a nuclear meltdown, see? And when you add the explosion in on it, you're going to disperse the inventories in surrounding areas. So there's nothing left of this building. This is it's hard to appreciate how big the building is. This is a 65 meter, 190 foot, 19-story reactor 4. And these are very robust buildings. And the pillars you're looking at exposed up there, you can actually turn an SUV around on them. That's how big they actually are. So anything that could invoke that much damage clearly would have took out the reactor core and the fuel pool. Now they were doing maintenance, so 3/4 of the reactor core was still in the reactor, and the fuel pool still there's 2 of them there, because they don't have a repository anywhere. They were full of about 10 reactor cores. So each building was equal to about 1,000 Chernobyls of uranium, plutonium, and their daughters. We're talking about millions and millions and millions of pounds in each fuel pool. They're stuffed because they haven't come up. They didn't, and the reason the fuel pools, by the way, are still splitting atoms, and they'll boil dry in 24 hours, basically, if you don't add water to it. Japan orders evacuation of residents near the nuclear plant. This is March 11, 2011. The ground self-defense force sent to areas near Fukushima and nuclear plant to assist evacuations. And 3,000 ordered to evacuate near the quake-hit Fukushima nuclear plant. And Fukushima Prefecture warned, now a lot of people couldn't evacuate because of the tsunamis, for instance. And the Fukushima Prefecture warned of radiation leak. Again, you see the word leak. It's a very the nuclear industry should never be allowed to use the word leak ever again. It's been literally weaponized against humanity and the 8 million species. Nuclear is the worst thing can happen to a planet. And the nuclear people are such low morals. There's nothing they won't do. Just to get a pat on the back in the bathroom next time you go in. Chief Cabinet Secretary, shitface, Yukio Idano, said at a news conference that the government called for a preemptive evacuation of 5,800 people to stay calm in following the order. The government also instructed 45,000 well-disciplined slaves living outside the area but in a 10-kilometer radius to stay at home. Well, staying at home is the worst thing you can do because nuclear radiation is the most carcinogenic thing that exists. Like you put 200 million atoms in a head of a needle, you can't see it. And just one of them eventually will make you sick. It may take 10, 20, 30 years, but it'll make you sick. The plant's emergency diesel power generation equipment has stopped working, leading the company to dispatch power supply cars. According to the agency, as the power supply cars have reached the plant, the company is proceeding with work to resupply electricity to restore the cooling function. It's March 11th. But see, you couldn't reach it because you had a tsunami for 1,800 kilometers. You had a devastating earthquake with massive aftershocks that have destroyed infrastructure. You couldn't even reach her. That's quite the story, isn't it? Because that's the day one, right? March 11th, this story is. The plant's emergency, as the power supplies cars have, I thought they had a number there. It was something like 51 cars they sent, right? But you can't reach it because you had a tsunami come through. I'll show you pictures of the plant in a second. The Fukushima prefectural government reported that the cooling water levels of the number 2 reactor are dropping and warned that the continued decline would expose nuclear fuel rods to the air, and that would generate radiation. But it's a meltdown when that happens. It melts down. It doesn't need oxygen, by the way, to continue melting down. So you can have a meltdown in the bottom of the ocean, and it'll burn for 1 million years. Reactors were also automatically shut down at the company's Fukushima number 2 nuclear power station, which is the Durnford. Emergency supply of cooling water was started at one of them. Again, they never had no infrastructure. They didn't have any power there to do what they're suggesting they done. And we know that, right? Because we have hindsight documentation to back up those assertions. The Nuclear Safety Agency said sufficient cooling water is supplied at the reactor, but the tsunami prevented the agency from confirming whether pumps taking in seawater for 2 other reactors are working properly. Well, nothing's working. You just had a tsunami rip 2,000 square miles of your country out. At least that's what it was, out in the middle of the Pacific, the size of Texas. Fukushima Durnford also had major damage from 311. It's only 10 kilometers up the coastline, for goodness sakes, and submerged under 4 meters of water. It's an exact replica of Fukushima, right to the T. It's exact. These are twin. Around 300 aircraft and about 40 vessels of the self-defense forces have been dispatched or being prepared for dispatch to deal with the disaster. We got it. That's it. We got it. Okay, plane, I want you to go over here, and the other plane, I want you to go over there and help the victims. It's ludicrous. You're talking about 1,200 kilometers of coastline. Tokyo Electric Power Company, the operator of Fukushima Daiichi plant, reported that the level of the water surrounding the fuel rods was going down in the reactor. Radioactive material could be emitted if part of the rod is exposed to the air. My apologies. But officials of the prefectural government dismissed the view that the plant is in any critical situation. So the tsunami ran right through the site. Right? You know, it's coming in at 400 miles per hour. If that's not going to put everything into a critical, what will? So the original framing of the narrative was, don't look at me. The official of the prefectural government dismissed the view that the plant is in any critical situation. But this was the original what happened. This was the first hour. So when you get this happening in the first hour and you deny that that's a critical scenario, then that's an industry we can't have on our planet, period. Water spilled from a fuel pools containing fuel rods at Niigata plant in just by Ishikawa Prefecture, right across from the Noto. So we just covered that because you had a massive earthquake. But the Niigata Prefecture just had an accident on January the 1st where it spilled water out of there again. And now that's on the other side of Japan. It's quite interesting, isn't it? March the 22nd again. Fukushima number 2 reactor's fuel rods fully exposed and melting is feared. And that was the 14th of March. So reactor 1 and 3 are long gone at this stage. Rapid meltdown happened at reactor 2 and 3, indicated by the black smoke in number 3. A rapid meltdown happened at reactor 2, indicated by the black smoke. Fuel rods at the quake hit Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant's number 2 reactor were fully exposed at one point. Think about that statement now. The fuel rods, which is eight or 9 reactor cores, were fully exposed at one point, which meant they melted down right away. And we know now in hindsight, they actually liquefied. And these people would have known it too, see? Because these are in the know, right? These people. The rods were exposed. The rods were exposed as a fire truck or fire pump to pour seawater, which creates the sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs, into the reactor to cool it down and ran out of fuel. So, ran out of fuel. We got all kinds of cars, but we couldn't find a hose to get any fuel, George. So, like on one side of their mouth, the generators are there, and they got power. It's great. Have a nice day. Don't worry, we're in the nuclear industry. We're the best. We can always call on the Hulk and Spider-Man, see? So that's the only pump truck they had. The other 5 were destroyed by the tsunami because, they had a tsunami, right? And there's people out there will tell you that there's only, and very knowledgeable people, people that flew across or drove across America after Fukushima with Geiger counters taking donations, telling people that nothing got out. Let me play a clip of that stuff. Yeah, let's start off with that one. This guy is going to tell you that only a couple of inches ran through the plant. Now have a look at the picture. Now he's going to do this years later. He's going to do this about 7 years later, tell you nothing got through the plant. But what he's doing is he's actually reading off a screen. I'm going to adjust the volume on my end for you.
I'm not joking. They took the radioactive debris from Fukushima the day after the tsunami hit, and they had it all ready to go. The 60 years worth of stored radioactive fuel, they had it all ready to go on pallets.
They had it all ready to go on pallets. Ready to go after the earthquakes. So he's saying an earthquake can't cause a meltdown. But all he's really doing, his dad was military. He's hooked up with, he used to go to the bases all the time, right?
The reactor was already shut down in maintenance mode when the earthquake hit. Then the tsunami came in, and Fukushima sits about 30 to 40 feet up off the ocean, up on a big mound. And so the wave that came in was only 30 to 40 feet high at the most, so it only got a couple feet of water that came in.
So it only got a couple of feet of water that came in. Clearly, that's just a couple of feet of water. Hard to argue with that guy.
They faked the damage, took the debris.
So they faked the damage, like terrible fake, right? They could have done better than that, I agree. That looks pretty fake to me.
The 60 years worth of stored radioactive debris, took it quickly, had to have buried it in the ground somewhere nearby, not far away, in the same region most likely, and buried it in a casket of, buried the waste in the casket of tsunami debris, and then blow up the thing 2 days later, 3 days later, and sprinkle some radium around so you get a radioactive debris, slight detection, kind of heavy, making the Geiger counters click around the plant itself, and then everything goes away within a few years. No radiation reaches the shores of the United States.
No radiation reaches the shores of the United States. Now, he drove across the country, so clearly faked it, and sprinkled some radium around the site, like, man, oh man. This guy's a demon, eh?
No radiation detected. I drove all the way across the country taking readings, and here we are. I still can take readings, and it's still incredibly low. It's below what we would consider normal range. Normal range being 30 to 40 clicks per minute.
So, like, this is absurd.
No radiation detected. I drove all the way across the country taking readings, and here we are. I still can take readings, and it's still incredibly low. It's below what we would consider normal
Why
range.
didn't
Normal
he
range
drive
being
across
30
the
to 40
country?
clicks per minute.
These are scary
So
people.
that being said, the fish is fine. And I've already done tests on the fish too. So the whole Fukushima thing's a scam, guys. They took that debris, buried it in the ground over there, and are collecting money for a thing that they blew up. And all they did was blow it up and sprinkle a little radium around the area or whatever, and everybody thinks that it's a nuclear meltdown. Notice all the robots keep dying. Oh yeah, robot keeps dying. So on here on the card, right off the top, it's absolutely beautiful. Again, we've got almost the same kind of flowers going on here, and it says, thank you. Thank you for your kindness.
Thank you for being such a sucker, is what he said. He took donations driving across the country, right, because he wanted to redirect people. So the military set him up, and he had the really expensive Geiger counters, folks. He just happened to have them sitting around. He got that military haircut. His name is Dutch Sink. And he's got 500,000 subscribers. And he's a loathsome, despicable, terrible human, eh? So there's a lot of people out there to confuse you. He doesn't provide any evidence. I provide you the documentation. It's an educational program. TEPCO said the water levels later recovered to cover 30 centimeters in the lower part of the fuel rods. This is the 14th. So, the whole story is absurd, because the minute the fuel rods are exposed, they catch fire and they burn at incredible temperatures. And the meltdown, once it gets to 5%, all you can do is run away. But here they are claiming TEPCO, which is still in charge, because they want you to blame TEPCO instead of the nuclear industry. And that's where the universities, the professors should all be blamed first. They're the worst humans. Well, they look like humans, but they're the worst creatures I've ever seen. Symposium Questions and Answers, 2013. Explosion at Fukushima Unit 3 drove the nuclear fuel out of the storage pool and scattered it up to 2 miles away. Right? And that's 2 different fuel pools detonating right there. And you can see up there these big chunks. That's the fuel pools in the reactor cores falling back down to Earth. The seawater injections operation started at 4:34 p.m., but the water levels in number 2 reactor fallen sharply with only 1 out of 5 fire pump trucks working. There's only 1 fire truck working. The other 4 were feared to have been damaged by a blast that occurred in the morning at the nearby number 3 reactor. So, do you think this reactor could have caused some other damage? I just showed you the explosion. The biggest explosion was that building, because it was a plutonium mixed oxide building, so it cooks off 200,000 times hotter than a typical meltdown. Utility firms said a hydrogen explosion, which is a nuclear meltdown, caused by a nuclear meltdown, at the nearby number 3 reactor occurred Monday morning, may have caused a glitch in the matrix of the number 2 reactor. So number 2 is right over alongside of it. Well, first off, the site was bulldozed by a tsunami, right? At high speeds. Faster than any river on the planet. Similar cooling down efforts have been taken at the plant number 1, number 3 reactors. And explosions occurred at both reactors in the process, blowing away the roofs and the walls of the buildings that housed the reactors. So this is not blowing away the walls, neither was that one up there. This is blowing the building, the fuel out of the building itself. And in the case of reactor 3, it's very visible. There's nothing left. It's a stump. There's nothing functional. You got to be... There are gullible people out there, but if you're watching this show, you're not one of them. It is feared that the number 2 reactor will follow the same path to prevent a possible hydrogen explosion at the number 2 reactor. TEPCO said it will look into opening a hole in the wall. They're going to cut a hole in the wall, George, at a building that houses the reactor, So on the 14th, this is where they were. They couldn't get close to the building. They had a fire hose. This was symbolic. This was just meant to pacify the population. Oh, they got it under. Look, they got a fire hose, Tillard. Jeez, that's wonderful. They got it under control, Dana. The company has also begun to work to depressurize the containment vessel of the number 2 reactor by releasing the radioactive steam. I've heard these before. Well, first off, the site is just completely wrecked. It's wrecked. There's nothing there. Like, it's a nightmare. And once the first reactor blew up the next morning, March the 12th, which was the number 1 reactor, you ain't walking around the site, period. And remember, you got 1,200 miles of coastline looked like this or that. And Fukushima was no different. Do you really think that you're going to go there and find an extension cord and plug into it and charge up your phone? Anywhere heard news coming through in Japan's reactor? This was March 11th. I've been reading reports of 4 reactors shut down, 1 reported to loss of cooling, and 1 that reported a fire, and evacuations being ordered. Well, you're on top of it. March 11th. According to NHK TV News, Japan's Broadcasting Corporation, the mouthpiece of Japan, along with the Japan Times, the Fukushima 1 and 2 reactors are experiencing reactor cooling problems after diesel generators fail, but also saying there is no cause for alarm, even though the government has declared a nuclear emergency. Well, like this picture here shows the tsunami coming in. Right? Here's the tsunami coming in. Starting to rise up. It's rising up, and now it's insane, right? Now the best you can hope for is to keep your head above water. Friday, March 11th, I just got a request from a friend which mentioned this report. I would be interested in everything you get on it. Delivering coolant via aircraft does not make much sense. And this was Hillary Clinton, right? Had made that announcement. If the report is accurate as written, Japan and us has a problem. Oh, you got a problem. How are you going to put cooling into the reactors after this creature came through? Anybody want to explain that one to me? You only got 1 fire truck on the site. The World Nuclear Association, the worst of the worst human can offer. The main nuclear industry body said on Friday that it understood the situation at the Fukushima Daiichi Nuclear Power Plant 1 after a massive earthquake and was under control, Dana. And the water was being pumped into it and it was cooling it down. Water's being pumped into it, so don't worry about it. Yeah, they had a tsunami, Dana, but it's a nuclear industry. We can do anything. We're different. Yeah. What do you like against a pickup truck at 60 miles an hour, I wonder? Because there's going to be a couple of billion people hunting you in the future. March 11, 2011, U.S. delivers coolant to Japan's nuclear power plant. Clinton, the plant is being cooled. We may be okay for a tsunami, but are we prepared for what will happen if the situation at the Fukushima Daiichi gets worse? Well, that's fallout based on the Norwegian Institute for Air Research, based on 20 days of radiation. And based on venting, not the actual loss of the inventories. Importance high. March 11th. There is a report of a problem at a Japan nuclear plant. We should be prepared to brief on our tsunami research. Excuse me. We may be called on to comment on the impact of San Onofre and Diablo Canyon. Because they were very hot topics, right? March 11, 2011. Lots of news reports going on right now about Fukushima reactor. Very sketchy information, but Japan has declared a state of emergency as a precaution. And about 2,500 people in the surrounding area are being told to evacuate. From what I can tell, all 6 operating boiling water reactor units at the site shut down due to the earthquake and the tsunami. Apparently, the Unit 1 is not operating, so Unit 1 is cooling on batteries for about an expected 8 hours. So when the tsunami went through and tore that place in two, they ran down and turned the batteries on, Dana. Right. So after that this is Reactor 4 is right around the corner here. So then they ran in and turned the batteries on. Jeez, that's great news. I want a set of batteries like that. Man, that's pretty cool. I can guarantee you there's no batteries turned on. They lied about every facet of it. And if you go through the 4.4 million emails and start tooling around with them, you'll find out quite quickly. In light of a claim made by the NRC speaker at the RIC claiming that the Japanese plants are more seismically robust than the US plants, which is scary as hell, right? The US plants are not as robust as the Japanese plant. Note that if you request by colleagues in another country provide technical advice, colleagues in another country, provide technical advice and assistance during an emergency, all such communications must be handed through to the public relation firm for the nuclear industry, the NRC. And this is what I mean by the poll, right? Did the NRC, the International Atomic Energy Agencies, the medias, and the universities worldwide, all of them, downplay Fukushima radioactive fallout, and because they knew that there was going to be an extinction event from it. And that's what the research shows. If you're requested by the colleagues in other countries, push it on to the Nuclear Regulatory Agency, the non-regulatory agency. Friday, March 11th, NRC is responding to an emergency outside of the United States. Again, right? This industry, the NRC does nothing. And nothing only sell your soul to the highest bidder. That's it. It is possible that some of us will be requested by the colleagues in another country to provide technical advice and assistance during an emergency. This is a catastrophic event, you plebe. It is essential that all such communications be handled through the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's operational center. These people are appointed, not elected, by the way. And they're the only ones who can make it illegal to poison you with radiation. And guess what? After 80 years, they have no intentions. The state of New York, the Office of the Attorney General, regarding seismic risk at Indian Point Nuclear Generation Station, March the 18th. So by March the 18th, all the reactors had already detonated. All the fuel pools were already gone. I'm writing you as a nuclear crisis initiated by the March 11 quake and subsequent tsunami in northern Japan is still unfolding. No, it's over, man. That thing is long gone. Everything is now covering the entire planet in perpetual disease factory. The Indian Point Nuclear Power Station in Buchanan, New York, sits just 24 miles from New York. Of all the power reactors in the United States, the 2 operating Indian Point reactors have the highest surrounding populations within a 50-mile radius and a 10-mile radius. So there's 17 million people live within 50 miles of these disease factories. And so there's not a single one of them that they haven't done multiple studies on autism, Down syndrome, etc., right? Sex ratio studies. They've been studying that population like they're pure guinea pigs. As the NRC acknowledged, Indian Point Unit 1, which was authorized in 1956, was built prior to any specific requirement for earthquake protection. So pre-1956 reactors didn't have any earthquake/protection. You can't protect them from earthquakes, folks. The NRC, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, has consistently blocked consideration of New York's seismic concerns. And the NRC also disregarded New York's scoping comment in 2007, which noted the Indian Point operator's environmental report and updated final safety analyst reports do not reflect seismic information developed in the early 80s, which asked NRC to require the owner to revise the outdated documents. The NRC subsequently issued a draft environmental impact statement based on this outdated information, but they failed to mention new information regarding the seismic activities developed recently by the United States. In other words, they hate your guts. And you think I'm kidding? You should really consider that thought. Friday, March 11th. I understand that there have nuclear emergencies declared at 2 plants. The TEPCO plant and Okanagawa Tohoku Power. The last I heard was the Onagawa, and that cooling was not anticipated. I don't know. There was 15 reactors shut down, right? March 11th. Nobody really knows because this industry is a perpetual liar. Note the reference to the turbine building fire in the first email is seismically induced. So the turbine building they're suggesting was caused by the earthquake because it started same as the meltdown at Reactor 1 started before the tsunami actually showed up. March 11th. The people of a town near Fukushima Daiichi unit within 2 kilometers were ordered to evacuate their homes. Like if you're within 100 miles of these disease factories, you should already be gone. Since you find out there's a nuclear plant within 100 kilometers, you should leave. Or rally to close it down and then leave. Please correct the following plants are just in emergency mode and not in emergency CCS mode. And that's March 11th. So Fukushima Reactor 1, Fukushima Daiichi Reactor 1, Fukushima Daiichi number 2, Fukushima Daiichi number 3, Fukushima Daini number 1, Fukushima Daini number 2, Fukushima Daini 2 and 4, whatever that's all about, 224. Right, the number 1 reactor was the boiling water reactor 3, where the other reactors were boiling water reactors 4, but they're still identical, basically identical buildings. It exhausts to the suppression pool. Could that be why the containment pressure went up? Now the containment pressure went up because you lost power for 1,200 miles and you had no way to restore it. It couldn't be restored. You lost all the infrastructure. You bashed everything at high speed with massive, I don't know how to describe that kind of energy we're looking at. I don't know what word to use, right? But we don't have anything that we can reference it to, except the tsunami. March 11, 2011. Pressure inside the containment of Reactor 1 of Fukushima Daiichi had been steadily increasing over that time. This is March 11. That its emergency core cooling system had not been active. Well, these reactors, they need 4,500 tons a minute, 1 million gallons a minute. And they needed to circulate to draw the heat away, remember, right? The whole story is crazy. The International Atomic Energy Agency informed in March that the number 1 reactor core started melting about 50 minutes after the cooling stopped, and then a melted pile of fuel in 3.5 hours. Not next day or next week, but 3.5 hours. It was long melting down now. Pressure increased beyond the reference level, but it was within the engineer's limit. So this was in the engineer's limit too, right? All the engineers that built all this stuff said that it was in his limit. No, nothing happened to nobody. Everything was perfect. Only nuclear can survive anything. If a meteorite comes down from space and smacks into a nuclear power plant, it'll actually just break off. It won't hurt the power plant. That's a true story. So this is Tokyo's over right here. This is all the aftershocks? I got no idea what it is. Sure is pretty though. 24.5 kilometers, 15. So the earthquake was 15 miles deep and 20 miles off the shore, according to the original information. Smoke rises from a building near Tokyo Bay in this photo taken from the waterfront. This is 2011, March 11th. The intensity on the Japanese seismic intensity scale of Fukushima was a 7. The quake struck 20 kilometers deep. So let's go back to that one. So 15, the depth was 15 miles. It registered a maximum 7 on Japan's seismic intensity scale, a 7 in the Miyagi, rather. I'm burnt out during late. I'll show you some video at the end of it, why I'm so burnt out. Long day. And more snow again today. Oh, God. The quake struck 20 kilometers off the coast in Iwate Prefecture. It lasted several minutes. It actually shook, I think it was 5 minutes or something. And aftershocks measuring 5 in Japan's seismic intensity scale hit the coast areas in Iwate prefectures. Strong tremors are also felt in Tokyo, registered 5 on Japan's seismic intensity scale in Tokyo, which is equal to like a 7.6 or something on the Richter scale. March 11th, Prime Minister declared a state of emergency. Noto Khan. 11 nuclear power plants automatically shut down. 3 nuclear power plants have problems and can't receive electrical power. Now, very serious situation. So they fake being, all kinds. I showed you at the very beginning where they pretend they're in the fuel pool. The fuel pools of the reactors at the very top of the buildings, and so is the reactor cores. The building actually doesn't exist. And they were changing fuel at Reactor 4. This is Reactor 4. So they were changing fuel, which means the reactor core, you see a piece over there and a piece here. That's the top part over there, is the bottom part. And this is the cover. And so this part was underwater and that part was underwater. And this was above. And so this is 100 feet below where the fuel pool is, right where my finger is right now. You can see the guts are hanging out of the building. There's nothing functional. When the waste material is stored underground, doesn't any of the radioactive water leach into the ground? So this is where we left off last night. And we're going to pick up from last night, because we couldn't finish everything last night. It's too complicated. March 21st, 2011. So now we're talking 10 days later. Some had a priority between the risk of human well-being and a pragmatic approach to managing this risky industry has gotten reversed. There should be no profit margin whatsoever for any industry involved in a substance as dangerous as radioactive material, let alone the current leaning towards viewing this Pandora's box of problems as an economical solution to our energy needs. You don't need, and you never did need nuclear. Geothermal could have resolved everything. You can have a geothermal plant in every community, for goodness sakes. And it could pay for itself in a short period of time. You can have massive geothermal plants if the universities, if you took a 10% of the manpower that is allocated from the institutions, universities, for nuclear research and put them together to resolve any lingering geothermal issues in order to tap into 6, 7, 8, 900 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, you'll resolve it within 30 days. No, we'll spend 100 years trying to resolve fission. We'll never get it. You can't get fission, or fusion rather, because fusion, the suns, the stars and that, they emit huge magnetic discharges, millions and millions of miles, just like plumes, millions and millions of miles of plumes in order for the fusion. Right? They emit the batteries are not going to work, or the world's biggest magnets aren't going to work. You're going to burn these things at 360 million degree Fahrenheit temperatures. You don't have anything on the planet can contain 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. Rather, so it's just one big hoax to take you away from coming up with solutions. Rather, periodically, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission provided an assessment of what the existing background dose to the United States public is. This is not a limit, standard, or guideline, but rather a measurement, an estimate of generalized annual exposure rates in a defined geographic, demographic area. And I just looked at the latest number provided by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's website, which was 620 millirems a year. Why are you using millirems for? This antiquated. Because you keep changing, so you can't understand it. See? You can't associate 20 years with another 20 years with another 20 years and draw a conclusion. This is why they keep changing the definitions. My question is, the last 30 years or so, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission released numbers for background radiation exposure to the U.S. population has risen from 100 millirems a year to the current 620 millirems a year. So how was it that the last 30 years we got an extra 500 millirems into our biosphere, into our ecosystem? And one of the previous drivers of the increase in background radiation dose rates, this is previous before they changed it again, this is pre-100 millirems, was above ground or atmospheric nuclear weapons testing. That's how you get up to 100 millirems, see? So, by the way, radioactive materials from our reactors is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. It's like explosions going off in your cells, wrecking your chromosomes, your DNA, and your cells and everything else. Radiation health specialists, children with over 11 becquerels a kilogram of cesium start to see heart problems. So just setting you up for the rest of the story here. Irreversible heart damage for children with 50 becquerels a kilogram. Like, you're talking about something so small, with 200 million of these. Think of a becquerel as an atom, and the atom pulses energy every second. That's the becquerel. So you have 50 atoms. So permanent heart damage to children with 50 becquerels, 50 atoms in their body. And cesium immediately damages the heart muscles, among other things. So the original 100 millirems were from nuclear testing and from subsurface testing under the ocean nuclear bombs, right? But the radiation, that's where the sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyball was originally known. So that was the 50s. They were well aware of this phenomenon of using salt water. So the fact that they sprayed salt water in a reactor for about 40 days in Japan, allegedly, is absurd, see, because of the interaction creates these sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs. And then they call it as leaks from like nuclear testing is not a leak. Even the underground testing cracked the earth open and vented everything back into the environment. Global radiation levels decreased as a result of not cooking off nukes in the atmosphere anymore. Around the time of Chernobyl, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission increased the calculated dose rate to 300 millirems a year, then again to the present number on the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. So TEPCO produced some numbers. These were all a fraction of a percent, right, numbers? But that was the official numbers they released. So Neptunium-239 dispersals covering the entire planet. So for them to suggest that global radiation levels have decreased is ludicrous. We've never seen fallout like we're seeing from Fukushima. And the biggest byproduct of radiative fallout is the curium isotopes. The model to the left is 10 million atoms from the French government study of cesium-137. We've never seen something like that before. This surpasses all nuclear testing by many orders of magnitudes. And then, by the way, the biggest byproduct of radiative fuel rods is the curium isotopes of beta. And it's a nasty one. You need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for the plutonium, which is named after the devil. That's the biggest byproduct. But sure, there's lots of cesium, lots of iodines, but it's easy to find them, see? And you can't find cesium iodide with a gamma. You can't find the betas, the alphas, or the neutrons. And this is why they direct you to gamma only. The question again is, given a fairly dramatic increase, more than sixfold, since it was increased from nuclear atmospheric testing to underwater nuclear explosions. That's how we got up to 100 millirims. Now we're up to 600 plus. So as the NRC has to calculate this in the first place to account for the various dose components, somebody in the agency must know which factors in the dose calculations are responsible for the increase in the calculated dose rate. This was Holly Janberg. Around the time of Chernobyl, they increased the calculated dose from 100 millirims to 300 millirims, everybody on the planet. And so Chernobyl, this was RT, the Russian media, in the first 2 days or something. I'm going to turn the volume up. If I click play.
The fact that the reactor in Japan is 100 times more powerful than the one in Chernobyl, and in fact the two stations, the two power plants in the Fukushima region produce the world's biggest joint amount of energy, and this means of course that this reactor, which is under threat now, is far more powerful than the one in the fourth block of the Chernobyl nuclear power station, which exploded 25 years ago.
100 times more powerful each reactor is. And you know, after Chernobyl, Belarus birth rates decreased by half. Fun facts. Okay, Kelly says Japan's nuclear reactors are not another Chernobyl. Well, I'm going to play that clip for you. But so Chernobyl was a single reactor, was a small reactor. Right, RT is telling you that each reactor is 100 times Chernobyl. That's being conservative, by the way, because you're talking about pure uranium, pure plutonium. But Chernobyl was a new reactor. Fukushima wasn't. Fukushima are 40 years old. And so they had a ridiculous amount of uranium, plutonium in the fuel pools. And so all of that is still splitting the atoms. Let's play that clip for you.
Well, a comparison that can be made is this is nothing like Chernobyl. It's a serious event. It offers some risk. It's worse than 3 Mile Island, but it's not 1,000th as bad as Chernobyl. Chernobyl was a reactor that was running. It was run up to full power and beyond, and it exploded while it was running. There was no containment building whatsoever on Chernobyl, which we have now at least 2 layers of containment that seem to be relatively intact in Japan. And finally, Chernobyl had a graphite core, basically charcoal. And when that 100 tons of charcoal caught on fire with radioactive fuel in it, this huge fire lofted into the air and carried it for hundreds of miles. Nothing like that is going to happen in Japan.
Okay. What was the date on that story anyway? March the 14th, so it had already happened. Hang on. So there's not going to be no plumes carrying it right around the planet. Nothing like that is going to happen at Fukushima. Now, March the 14th, it had happened over and over and over. Multiple reactors had detonated, right? And all of these reactors dwarfs, like you said, Chernobyl was basically charcoal. This is a scumbag. Right, this is another one of these degenerate scumbags and a half. So how did it go from 100 millirims a year to 620 millirims a year? That's the question. The NRC does not set the standards for annual public exposure limits. No. We merely update our documentation rulemaking accordingly. The standard is set by the National Council on Radiation Protection, Kathleen Higley and them. And I believe that the supporting document you're looking for regarding the most recent change in annual exposure limits is the NCRP Report 160, published in 2009. So sure enough, here it is. Well, let's go look at this. There's so many lies, how can you keep up with it, really, right? If you don't know an awful lot about the subject. The NCRP report number 160, ionizing radiation exposure of the population in the United States. In 2006, Americans were exposed to more than 7 times as much ionizing radiation from medical procedures as was the case in the 1980s, according to a new report on population exposure released March the 3rd by the National Council on Radiation Protection and Measurements at its annual meeting in Maryland. So CAT scans and nuclear medicine, nuclear therapy, radioactive therapy is what they're talking about. Let me just give you a small sample of radiation therapy. I think I could find a little bit for you if I try. Okay, actually I'll probably find a lot, but I went to the wrong spot. A little slow today. Let me try this again. I must have smurfed up. La, 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 la. Yeah, let's just run through a couple of these. So you go in the hospital, you put your loved one in the hospital to get radiation therapy. And so, introduction to radiation therapy, another silent epidemic, radiation injuries. So you're going to get radiation therapy and you get these radiation side effects, radiation injuries. And there's a lot of them. You can't keep up with them. Let's put it that way. Let's see if we can get through a few. So you got radiation-induced injury to the eyeballs, radiation injury to the heart. Let me get settled away here. Radiation injuries, cardiac injuries following breast cancer radiation therapy. Cardiac injuries following treatment for breast cancer. Radiation-induced kidney injury. Hypoxia, because you killed all the cells in your body on top of it. You're producing so many white blood cells, you get no more red blood cells carrying oxygen nutrition. Blood spinal cord barrier disruption, central nervous system, radiation injuries. Radiation-induced lung injuries. Radiation-induced bowel injuries from radiation therapy. Radiation-induced kidney injuries. Breast radiation injury litigation. Because so many women, right? Central nervous system radiation injuries. Injuries to the cranial nerves or nucleoids following the proton beam, the most deadly of deadly radiation. Properties protect lungs from radiation-induced injuries. Radiation injuries to the head and neck. Radiation-induced brain injuries, brain necrosis. Radiation-induced lung injuries. Radiation-induced small bowel radiation injuries. Radiation-related breast injuries. Radiation-induced intestinal injuries. Vitamin C uptake may save lives after a radiation accident. Radiation-induced brain necrosis. And that's all I'm going to get through. So when it comes to medical radiation, it's murder, is what they're talking about. You can't call it medicine, it's murder. These two imaging like CAT scans and nuclear medicine, contribute 36% of the total radiation exposure and 75% of the medical radiation exposure to the U.S. population. So, but that still doesn't. How does that get you to such a high number, though? Because the dose we're talking about is a massive number. So are they giving everybody a massive dose? And so when you go to get X-rays and they put a belt on you, or a lead belt, well, the radiation CAT scans in that day the X-rays and that, they calibrate themselves. And so what that means is it's going to increase the dose of radiation to get through the lead. And so they're not supposed to use them in the hospital no more, but because they're having a hard time, because hospitals get so many memos every day, that one gets lost in the shuffle is quite easy. And so they're irradiating the daylights out of your loved ones and yourselves. It's one of the most lethal things you can do to yourself is put that lead belt on you, for instance. And there's been many incidences of the X-rays machines not working the way they are and just destroying many, many people. The number of CAT scans and nuclear medicine procedures performed in the United States during 2006 was estimated 67 million and 18 million respectively. So 67 million CAT scans and 18 million nuclear medicine procedures. There is no nuclear medicine. It's like shooting toilet bowl cleaner in somebody's arm, basically, and hoping that it finds an issue and fixes it. It's wishful thinking, but it's murder. It's actually murder. So nuclear medicine, 18 million people a year are destroyed. Background radiation, which in 2006 contributed fully half of the total exposures. Well, no, in 2000 nuclear testing, it was less than 100 millirems. And so everything after that is man-made. We didn't just end up with more natural radiation. Everything is man-made, right? They don't contradict themselves very often, do they? Background radiation, they say fully half of the total exposure, but how is that when during the nuclear testing it was only 100 millirems, now it's 640? Comes from natural radiation in soil and rocks, and radon gas which seeps into your homes and buildings, plus radiation from space. And radiation sources that are found naturally within the human body. This is called stardust, right? This is stuff we're already acclimated to through genetic superior selection. It's natural. And pre-nuclear testing, it was probably a millisievert a year. And so how did we go from 100 millisieverts during the nuclear testing, because that was a raised limit too, to current 640 millisieverts, and now they're suggesting half of it solidly comes from background radiation, like the natural radiation in your body has no adverse side effects, right? It's homeostasis. Your body equalizes potassium and everything else naturally, which is not radioactive. You can't make a dirty bomb from potassium, right? If you tip over a truck full of potassium in the community, you don't abandon the community. Everybody can go out and fill up their buckets with free potassium. It's so harmless because your body regulates this kind of stuff we're talking about. So you can't get any more potassium or magnesium or iron or anything else in your body than your body can use and is already genetically superior selected for anyway. Right, so it regulates it the same way as a thermostat regulates the temperature in your house. Your body regulates it the same way as a cruise control regulates the speed of your car. It's an automatic process. And so you can't just jump from 100 millisieverts a year to 640 and say that it's more natural radiation. Because natural radiation was only introduced in order to muddle, it's the turd in the punch bowl, right? It was just meant to make the average person incapable of comprehending it. And then they figured out Homer Simpson can do that a lot easier, and Spider-Man and the Hulk, and then they pounded your brain cells for the last 60 years with that stuff. And radiation sources that are found naturally within the human body. So this is from the NCRP site itself. So corruption, is unbelievable. It's unbelievable how corrupt these monsters actually are. And this is the official version that they were directed to, right? Other small contributors of exposure to the U.S. population includes consumer products and activities. Activities. like kayaking and climbing mountains and flying on airplanes. So what they're trying to do is they want to blame it on something that it's not, instead of anthropogenic man-made radioactive fallout and contamination and everything else. And so there's no one to challenge him, right? And so there's no incentive not to get even more eviler. And guess what happens? Research use. So some of it, like they took 800 pregnant women up by Hanford, and they injected them with radiation, like strontium and that, plutonium. And they told them, or made them drink it, pregnant women, and they told them it was vitamin drinks and vitamin shots. Vitamin drinks and vitamin shots. And when it was actually man-made radiation, and then when the babies were aborted after the funeral, they would dig them up and take them over to Sandina or Idaho National Laboratories or Hanford, whatever, and ash the victims, which is incinerating, which is a polite way of incinerating them, and they would sniff the ashes then from anthropogenic man-made isotopes. There was 800 like that. There was an orphanage of sick children, and they gave them radioactive oatmeal. Quaker Oats was in on it. Occupational task. That's why I don't eat Quaker Oats anymore, once I found that one out. NCRP is working with some of its partners like the American College of Radiological and the World Health Organization. They're partners with the World Health Organization. So the NCRP is not independent. It's hooked up to the military-industrial complex. There is no such thing as nuclear medicine. I believe the supporting document you are looking for regarding, well, there is what they call nuclear medicine, nuclear therapy, but the studies clearly show you don't want to do something like that. And it's hard to comprehend why they're still doing it to you, only that the world is complacent and dumbed down now, right? I believe the supporting documents you're looking for regarding the most recent change in annual exposure limits is the NCRP's Report 160, published in 2009, which is the golden, is what the industry is using to bludgeon you with, basically. March the 18th, the NRC is negligent in performing its duty. U.S. pools are storing much more spent fuel than the ones in Fukushima are currently holding, on the average 4 times more than design intended. 4 times more than the design is intended, my goodness. Open air storage pools. U.S. pools are storing much more spent fuel than the ones in Fukushima are currently holding, on the average 4 times more than their intended storage. Why did you try to prevent the publication of a study on this issue completed by the National Academy of Sciences? I want transparency, not complacency. So this was an irate academic going after, who are they yelling at? To the NRC, to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Well, the Regulatory Commission, if you took blood samples, it's probably going to be yellow. What's to know, are we storing spent fuel rods vertically? If so, why? Shouldn't they be stored horizontally? If there's a problem, the rods need to be covered. It's a lot easier to fill a pool with a foot of water than 12 feet of water. Yeah, I don't think it matters which direction you store it. And there was no reason, only that they were too cheap to build enough pools, right? And, these pools are not like simple water. This is special water. And it boils off 120,000 liters a day. And each liter is going to be saturated with isotopes because the fuel in the pools are still splitting atoms. And that's when people say, well, you don't know what to do with nuclear waste. They don't understand why nuclear waste is bad. It's because it's still splitting atoms. And this is why almost every nuclear power plant is surrounded by farms, right? Daily log interpreters for the Japan crisis. Information on the Nuclear Regulatory Commission standards and radiation can be found there. Backgrounder and biological effects of radiation. Radiation's all around us. This is the United States Nuclear Regulatory Commission. It's in our environment since the Earth was formed. It's totally different than the anthropogenic man-made radiation, which is what it was supposed to find out. Instead of talking about harmless, stupid, everyday, normal background stuff that we're already acclimated to through genetic superior selection, that's why we exist on the planet in the first place. It's because we live in harmony with this. This is stardust, right? This is life itself. As a result, life is involved in the present significant levels of these are not ionizing radiation. It's completely dishonest. It comes from outer space, the ground, terrestrial, and even within our bodies. It's in the air we breathe, the food we eat, the water we drink, and the material used to build our homes. Yeah, but this is stuff we're already acclimated to through genetic superior selection. So the United States Nuclear Regulatory Commission is enemy number one. It's very disturbing that they went that some foods like bananas. So why would you invoke bananas? They got nothing to do with radiation. In other words, the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission is a vicious liar. This is and they don't waste a second. They're straight down to propaganda, stab you in the face over and over and over. The word despicable doesn't quite do it justice. March 21st, 2011, 2:31 p.m. Let me go back and grab all of that and put that in a special folder. Because I got to come out and pounce on them. I can't sit and let them get away with that. Just bear with me here. Bear with me so I can find a little... Okay, I got a folder here. Just let me post that. So I can find it later, because that's such an important story. We're going to come out and challenge them on that one of these days in the near future. Just a video only on that subject only, right? The NRC does not set the standards. We got that. March the 21st, below is the result of feedback form. It was submitted. Could radioactive particles emitted from Fukushima nuclear plant travel to Hawaii via the air or ocean waters? I know that a statement has been issued that it doesn't seem likely to have happened recently based on monitoring out there. However, could it be possible given the roughly 4,000 miles between Japan and Hawaii, since the current situation is not fully contained yet? This is March. They'll never contain it, right? It can't be contained. It was gone on day 6. If aftershocks occur, thereby causing more damage, and we talk about this on every earthquake, right, we're worried sick there's another radioactive plume on the way. The NRC takes public safety and security seriously, very seriously. Well, when you go to the website like we just done, then they're invoking bananas, potato chips, and walking in the sunshine, the complete opposite of anthropogenic man-made radiation. They're truly the worst of the worst humanity has to offer. The lowest forms of life imaginable. Nuclear insurance and disaster relief funds. Well, the Price-Anderson limits the payout for a nuclear accident. Everything has to come out of the taxpayers' blood. Inquiry being made into the nuclear insurance and disaster relief funds. Does the Price-Anderson Act apply to residential business owners? That is, if an area declared emergency evacuation necessary, is there relief available for the funds for both residential properties owners and the businesses affected? Just to select people from the government, the rest of them will have to do without. And just ask the victims of Japan. Like, it's really something, right, what they done to Japan? Entire cities ran away, and they didn't get any pay whatsoever. Because TEPCO just said, well, if you're outside of this area, we're not paying you a nickel. March the 14th. In 1995, the closest nuclear power plants, some 110 kilometers north of Kobe, were unaffected by a severe Kobe Osaka earthquake. It would, like the one you're talking about was on a different island. And 2004, 2005, 2007, 2009, Japan reactors shut down automatically due to ground acceleration exceeding their trip settings. It is estimated that worldwide 20% of nuclear reactors are operating in areas of significant seismic activity. And I know years ago there was a lot of controversy about nuclear power plants being built on fault lines because of an energy that exists there, a magnetic field that exists there that helps the reactors run even better. I can't remember the nuances, the minutiae, the details of the details right now, but the seismic design of such plants is based on criteria far more stringent than those applying to non-nuclear facilities. The Japan's Rokusho reprocessing plant, which is 28 years behind schedule, an associated facility, but they're storing nuclear fuel there that is splitting atoms into the environment, are built on stable rock and are designed to withstand an earthquake of an 8.25. The reality of it is, right, the fuel pools are not, there's no containment or anything else. Following a magnitude 7.3 earthquake in 2000 in an area with no geological faults was known, Japan ordered a full review of its March 13, 2011. I mean, it just had a fault line that's 3,000 years old. The first time in 3,000 to 4,000 years, it just became active. And the devastation in Noto Peninsula, Ishikawa Prefecture, is brutal. March 13, 2011, hydrogen explosion on March 11. This was a nuclear meltdown, what causes the hydrogen. The highest recorded radiation levels at Fukushima Daiichi site was 155 millirems on March the 13th. Radiation levels were reduced to 4.4 millirems by the evening of March the 13th. And NRC's radiation dose limit for the public is 100 millirems per year. But that's based on, as we talked about earlier, a completely dishonest, which is 740, see, millirems. So now you're talking about an extra 100 is what they were talking about. This is a senior materials engineer on March the 13th. So on March the 13th, Medusa had already happened, right? So for them to suggest that there's only 155 millirems at the site, this was lethal doses. There was over 1 million sieverts outside of Reactor 1. 3 sieverts is a lethal dose to a human. Japanese government officials acknowledged the potential of partial fuel meltdown at Fukushima Daiichi Unit 1 and 3 reactors. There's no danger for core explosions, which had happened multiple times already at this stage, as occurred at Chernobyl in 1986. Control rods have been successfully inserted in all the reactors, ending the chain reaction. You can't just end a chain reaction like that. The reactor cores at Fukushima Daiichi and Daini power stations are surrounded by steel and cement containment vessels of 40 to 80 inches thick that are designed to contain the radioactive materials. So that's great. So that means that's not real. That means, how's the poll doing here? Great, eh? Did the NRC, the International Atomic Energy Agency, the media, the universities downplay Fukushima radioactive fallout to hide an extinction level event? Well, they most certainly did, didn't they? That reactor core and the fuel pools were gone on the same, before they issued this statement right there from the NRC. The Fukushima Daiichi plant remains in a state of emergency. There is electricity available in all 4 of the reactors at Fukushima Daini, which there wasn't. Although there's limited availability of the cooling water pumps at reactor 1, 2, and 4. Again, there wasn't. There was 12 feet of water in the reactor buildings, for goodness sakes, from the tsunami. 12 feet of water went through that site. TEPCO is working to maintain constant cooling, primary containment of vessels of those reactors. No radioactivity has been recorded outside the secondary containment buildings at the Fukushima Dying, according to TEPCO. Now, see, again, that's just because TEPCO tells you anything, then they're telling you a lie, right? The diesel generators ceased functioning after approximately 1 hour due to tsunami-induced damage, aka 400 mile per hour tidal wave, reportedly to their fuel supply. DC power from batteries were consumed after approximately 8 hours. There's no batteries running anything on that site that day. Once this creature came through their site, once that creature came to the site, you ain't running jack shit. There's nothing left functional, right? So one thing we established yesterday in the day is they lied about every facet of this story. The cover story was immediately implemented, and it was controlled by the NRC, which is controlled by the International Atomic Energy Agency. At that point, the plant experience, which is a non-regulatory agency, doesn't have any sovereignty over any country, and is actually just a corporation. At that point, the plant experienced a complete blackout, no electric power at all. Hours passed as primary water inventory was lost and core degradation occurred, though some combinations of zirconium oxidization and clad failure. I'll have another look at that. No, it's gone. Portable diesel generators were delivered to the site. Were they? Really? They were delivered to the site. The 1,200 miles of the coastline was ripped off and carried out to sea. But anything to do with the NRC, anything to do with TEPCO, anything to do with the nuclear industry, the lobbying groups, the World Nuclear Association, World Nuclear News, any of them, NIST, and you name them, these are subhumans. They have no attributes of a human whatsoever. And all he done was they dug a big hole and threw all of us down there and then dumped nuclear waste on us. This is the 12th, the day after the tsunami. Portable diesel generators were delivered to the plant site. So how does that work anyway? You got a whole bunch of mules and you drag it through all this tsunami debris to get to the site, and then you get all the homeless together and you all go heave. AC power was restored, allowing for a different backup pumping system to replace the inventory in the reactor pressure vessels. Again, this is absurd lies. It's very, very dishonest, very disingenuous, very deceitful, very sadistic. The drywall containment was vented to the outside reactor building which surrounds the containment. Hydrogen produced with zirconium oxidization was vented from the containment into the reactor building. And hydrogen in the reactor building exploded, causing it to collapse around the containment. Yeah, everything was normal. They picked their way through that, and they had generators, and they just reconnected the power because everything was hunky-dory. Yeah, as soon as the water receded, they got out their brooms and mops and paper towels and cleaned it all up, Dana. Oh, well, that's great. Decision was made to inject seawater into the RPV to continue to the cooling process, another backup system that was designed into the plant from the inception. Radioactivity released from the operator-initiated venting appeared to be decreasing. These are disgusting maggots, aren't they? Is a nuclear reactor meltdown a catastrophic event? Not necessarily. Nuclear reactors are built with redundant safety systems. Even if the fuel in the reactor melts, the reactor containment system will contain it like butter in a container, Dana. Like a cow's bladder contains the milk, Dana. Nuclear power industry will learn from this event and redesign our facilities as needed to make them safer in the future. So have a nice day. Jay Collins, March the 14th. The likelihood there will be a huge fire like at Chernobyl or a major environmental release like at Chernobyl, I think that's basically impossible. So James F. Stubbins, a nuclear energy professor at the University of Illinois. Well, a couple had already happened by March the 14th. That's what I mean, like a professor of nuclear is you're literally your worst enemy, and they're going to take your children and turn them into real-life monsters. How else can you describe these people besides the real-life monsters? Excuse me. March the 14th, an explosion caused by hydrogen at Unit 3 to Fukushima Daiichi. It's not caused by hydrogen. Hydrogen is caused by a nuclear meltdown. According to TEPCO, the containment vessel unit was not broken. But I showed you so many pictures of Unit 3. These were all TEPCO's pictures that they released, right? They're all in different... Somebody was running away with a camera up in the air, and they were clicking pictures as they were running away, basically. There's no containment, there's no reactors, there's no fuel pools there. They're gone. And every academic on the planet knew it right away when he seen that picture. March 14, 2011, the wind condition is calm, and the direction of the wind above the station is the west or the southwest. Residents living within an area of 20 kilometers are requested to shelter in the nuclear wasteland, get sick, and die. As of 7:30 March, I'm not sure if that's AM or PM. March the 14th, the measurements of the radioactive materials in the environmental monitoring area near the site boundary by the monitoring car confirmed the increase in radioactivity comprised by to the radioactivity at 1900 March the 13th at 26 microsieverts an hour. So these are just disgusting people. Every time I read this stuff, I hate them a little bit more, and it's hard to comprehend how much I hate these people. Unit 3. This is March the 14th. Fresh water is being injected through a fire extinguisher system in the Unit 3. Again, this is absurd to suggest that they were. Once Reactor 1 blew up, that was the end of it. You're not going near the reactors because you got fuel pellets everywhere. These are lethal doses no matter where. These are landmines every 2 inches. Power station must evacuate. Residents living in an area 10 kilometers radius must take sheltering. Like if you ever hear of emergency and you're living close to a nuclear reactor, they say to shelter in place. Figure out if where the wind is blowing. So if the plant is over there and the wind is blowing right directly to you here, you want to go right or left for 500 miles and don't look back. Medusa is right behind you. Case from travel from Fukushima Public Welfare Hospital. The Nohomatsu man and woman center, Fukushima Prefecture. Number of persons measured by 60 persons. Exposure could have happened while waiting to be picked up by a helicopter at Fukushima, which is south, 2 miles south of Fukushima, high school grounds. So they left a lot of people behind and then told them to rally at the high school and we'll pick you up by helicopters. Headquarters, so it's nuclear wasteland, that's why they done it that way. Headquarters judged that there were no exposures to 35 persons who traveled from Fukushima Public Welfare Hospital to the next hospital. Case from Fukushima. Residents evacuated by buses. Number of persons, 100 persons. Measures results, 9 people out of 100 persons. One was 18,000 counts per minute. 18,000. Another one was 30,000 and 36,000 counts per minute. Another was 40,000 counts per minute, because they're only measuring gamma, right? So multiply by 600 to get the real number. A little less than 400 counts per minute. A very small count, 5. This result was measured without shoes, although the first measurement exceeded 100,000 counts per minute. When they took their shoes off, they only had 5 counts per minute. Is that what they're saying? I don't know. These people are insane. Scarberry. Venting fission products, daughters off-site. That's the tall stacks. You couldn't vent anything from that site, because the site was ripped apart by a massive tsunami. You couldn't do anything there, right? Once the tsunami came through, there was nothing. You couldn't turn anything on or off after that. You just had a tsunami, right? And the tsunami, and so that's when the tsunami was receding. But there was multiple tsunamis. You can see another one's coming in, right? So the first one goes in, and the next one comes in on top of that one. Next one comes in on top of that one. That's how it managed to travel 10 kilometers inshore. So this is probably number 2 right there you're looking at. Boiling in the spent fuel pools, feeding as able with seawater. Well, you couldn't do anything with seawater because the site was disabled completely. Unit 1 was it was 4 reactors at the Daini and 6 at the Fukushima. And weren't they building 2 more reactors at Fukushima at the time? March the 14th. We found a document below. Population categories exposed from Chernobyl. Emergency recovery operations workers who worked at Chernobyl power plant in exclusion zones after the accident. Individual dose estimates of 2 to 20 grays. And lethal dose is 4 grays, which is a gray is basically a sievert. They hijacked 1 million people to work at Chernobyl, right? And every one of them got sick. Every one of them was entitled to a pension. Yeah, it's like $7 a month, but it's a pension. It was just complete. Once you get sick from radiation, they'll do everything to get rid of you. And I ain't going to go down that road tonight because we're almost through. Before Fukushima, after Fukushima. See, they're only circling 2 reactors after it.
Well, it's the night.
This is me today. And we're at that moment. Let me get my big thick head editor. I'm just going to play some short videos from today, and that'll be the show tonight. Just give me a second here. And so I went out and bought another winch. You'll see why coming up. I needed something with less power, because 12,000 pound winch for the quad is kind of overkill. It is overkill. I'm tearing stuff apart.
Well, it's the 19th of February, and here we go again. We need a fuel treatment, and I don't buy them very often, but I did today, so sue me. And I needed something with a remote control.
So I bought that one.
So another $270 down the bowl. Okay, so we picked up another winch.
Which is that winch right there.
Because my 12,000 pound one is too powerful. I gotta weld this back on. Something like that. I'm gonna tack it on. When I tack it on, then I'll let it go, and then I'll finish the weld. We're gonna use the new small welder that we got, the stick welder.
Yeah, but we had a few problems with that, and we'll get around it. We'll figure it out. Yeah, I got mice in my shed.
Alrighty, so we didn't. We had a few problems with the welding helmet. It's been in the dark too long. The same thing with Fridge. And so we had to give up on the welds. Maybe I'll bring up to the welding shop tomorrow if everything goes right. Kind of. Hopefully I didn't hurt my eyes. Hopefully Fred didn't hurt his eyes. It's snowing again. Holy shit, it's snowing again. So I might just go out and finish plowing for a few minutes. And then give it up for today. It's getting in the evening now. We got to get a show ready. Got all kinds of snow made it in here because not everything works the way you want it to, obviously, right? But I went down and picked up a 2,000 pound winch this morning, and then some fuel treatment. That stuff is expensive, but you gotta have it. You gotta have it for all the equipment and the truck and the boat and blah blah blah. It's a never-ending nightmare. We got most of the garbage put out. Yeah, we got the garbage put out, so that's all that really matters, Dana. We got a poll tonight. We're going to close that down in a second here. Did the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the International Atomic Energy Agency, the media, the universities worldwide downplay the Fukushima radioactive fallout to hide an extinction level event? That darn tootin' they did. Rootin' tootin', that's what they actually did. And so we got 47 votes on the poll. Thank you, everybody. 100%. 100%. And James Lucid donated another $200 last night, folks. That's the only reason we got the extra gear. We picked up a bunch of little odds and ends, which is what he said it was for. And we had to have the other winch because that 12,000 pound winch and quad, and we can tear that apart. So we got that resolved. And I'm going to weld that winch onto one of the, I think I'm going to weld it onto one of the trailer hitches that we got. I'm not sure I'm going to do this. Yipper, that's right. Thank you, everybody. Hugs for everybody. Have a great night. If you made this far, don't forget to give us a thumbs up. See everybody tomorrow night. I'm busted up because I never stopped Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or today. I'm literally busted up. And it feels good to be busted up. Still have a bunch of stuff to get done. So I'll be definitely hard work tomorrow. I want to try to get as much as I can finished by Thursday so I can take a couple days off and try to recover from the madness of this week. Anyway, that's what I got for tonight. Nuclear industry lied every facet of Fukushima. Every single facet for it. Right from the very get-go. That's what we showed last night and night. It's heartbreaking, right? The
worst of the worst, and what they done to us is frightening. See everybody tomorrow night. Have a great night, great day tomorrow. And if you can donate, the links are in the bottom of the description. We're way in the hole now. We got to get the rest of this stuff, so people are going to have to support me because I can't do it on my own. Take care, folks. We'll see everybody soon.